Hey creative friends, it's Gwen. I bet you have in your stash a bunch of punches that perhaps you haven't used in a while. It's time to pull them out because today I'm going to create two layouts. The first layout will be using a cut file, and the second layout will show you how you can recreate that very same look using paper punches. I have pulled out some Pink Fresh Studio supplies, and this is the cut file I'm using. It is called Heart Circles. Be sure to check the link in the description box below. I've gone ahead and backed the cut file in two contrasting pattern papers. I happen to have quite a few of these supplies, and I did find two photos of my daughter that were similar but different, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to create two of these pages. They're going to look very, very similar. One will end up in our family album and the other will end up in her personal album. I really want to be able to show you that you can recreate a cut file look with some really simple paper punches. Now that I've backed the cut file, I know exactly what I'm trying to replicate, and I've pulled out two paper punches. The first is a very simple 2-inch circle punch, and the second is a butterfly punch. The cut file design had a heart on the center, but I did not have a punch that was large enough, so I just substituted the heart for a butterfly. I am always telling you to substitute and use the stash that you have, and that's exactly what I'm doing for this layout. You can see here too that I used exactly the same colored pattern papers, and I did actually toy with the idea of adding an extra circle just punched out in white cardstock, and it would have actually looked even more like the cut file had I done that. However, I would not have been able to fit 5 of the circles across the width of my layout. They were too large. I'm going to take some time to line the butterflies up nice and neatly. I'm using my T-square ruler to do that and my ATG tape because I can very easily reposition that tape. It'll give me some flexibility and some wiggle room to make sure that everything is lined up really, really well before securing it down more permanently. I'll be sure to leave links for all of the supplies that I use in the description box below. The fastest way that I found to do this is to actually start in the center of the layout. Find the very center, so 6 inches, and then center the butterfly in that position, and then work outwards and upwards. And the T-square ruler really does help with this because you can make sure that everything is perfectly aligned, and see there how I can just make the smallest adjustments with the ATG tape. It's really, really handy. As I work row by row aligning everything, I need to know, what is your favorite punch to use? Do you have some in your stash that you just keep going back to time and time again? I want to know about them because maybe I need them for my stash too. With that all done, I can now get onto my photo. I am going to use the cut file as a bit of a foundation for the layout. It's going to be part of the background, and it's going to be an anchor point for my photo and all of my embellishments. I am going to keep the design for this layout pretty simple, and that's because I want to replicate it. I will take a sweep through the die cut ephemera pack, and I'm going to pull out anything that I think will work with this layout. But also, if I find something that's going to work with the other layout, I'll put that aside now too. I don't want to get to the point where I'm starting on my second layout and I've left myself short embellishments. So with everything, I guess it's best to start with the end in mind. And if I know that I want to recreate two layouts, I'm going to find similar icons and I'm going to set them aside for each of the layouts. As I was going through, I did notice that there were some repeating sentiments, and I wanted to be careful not to put them on the same layout, like to use those across the two pages. For example, the round element that I have on the layout already says "You are loved," and then there is a long rectangular die cut that's pink up the top of the screen there that says "You are so loved." So the die cut's actually going to end up on the other layout, and I'm going to use the circle element on this page. I'm going to anchor all of my embellishment clusters to the photo. I actually think that the background with the cut file and the punched version is quite busy because the pattern papers I've used are quite busy. So I don't really think I need to add very much there. So all of the elements that I am going to add are going to be clustered near and around the photo. I did also have a think about the title and found these alphas. They are not from this collection, but they are obviously Pink Fresh Studio. So I'm actually going to use them up. I want to say they're from Perfect Day. They are from deep in my stash and I'm pretty sure you can't even buy them anymore. But look, they go beautifully. So I'm going to use those up and I am going to run the title across the very top edge of the photo. Now, while we're here, we really need to talk about design and flow of the page because generally speaking, I would have the flow going left to right, the same way that your eye reads across a page. For this layout, it is actually indeed right to left. So you would start at the top of the page where the title is there, and it would travel down the photo, down the page, and across towards the left. There are a couple of ways that I've made this work. Firstly, the title itself will encourage the eye left to right. It's at the top of the layout. I have made sure to put my main embellishment cluster directly underneath it. It's kind of like a full stop, it's an anchoring point, and it also helps lead the eye down the photo, which is a portrait photo on purpose. So then your eye is being led down the page. And then I finish it all off with a smaller embellishment cluster on the left. So that way your eye is then drawn across to that cluster on the left and that finishes out the path. I talk about the flow of pages a lot and I think about it a lot. As I'm creating, I always have in my mind an idea of how I want the eye to travel across the page. And for me, that's how I get my flowing clusters. And I think that's how I just put my pages together. It's just the way that my mind works when I'm thinking about where to put my embellishments and how many and all of that. Sometimes it's really hard for me to put this all into words, but I know that you really appreciate it. I get a lot of feedback about how I explain things, and I don't just tell you what I'm doing, but I will try my very, very best to explain what my thinking is behind the placement of things. Things are getting serious because I'm gluing stuff down. I also need to mention here about the repeating elements. You'll notice that I have chosen icons that are circular for my embellishment clusters here, and that's because I wanted to replicate the circles in the cut file onto and into my embellishment clusters. It just gives the layout a really put together feeling, and in fact I think if I had have gone with more rectangular or square shaped ephemera, it would have looked very blocky. So the circles just continue with this lovely flow that we've been talking about. I am going to add a sentiment here on the left top corner, and that's that layout done. So on to our second layout, and you can see already that it is going to look very, very similar. I will also say that putting this second layout together was oh so much faster because there was a bazillion predetermined decisions. I had already chosen a second title element to use. This one says beautiful, but I know where it's going to go because I already figured that out when I created the first layout. I've already decided the plan for the embellishment clusters and the photo placement as well. So this is really just following along a bit of a recipe that I made when I created that first layout. I did have one small struggle though, and that was with the photo placement because I had added in some stitching on my background. Can you see it there? Through the butterflies, I had done just like straight lines with my sewing machine just to add a little bit of extra texture there. And I was having a little bit of trouble lining up the edge of the photo with the edge of the sewing. I didn't know whether I wanted to have the stitching showing on the right or the left because I couldn't have it showing on both sides. The photo was too wide. Hope that makes sense. If I move the photo to the left a little, it would cover up the stitching on the left. And then if I moved it to the right, it would cover up the stitching on the right. And that actually messed with the placement of this title, so much so that I had to pull it up and replace it. I wanted it really, really nestled in against that top right-hand corner of the photo. So yeah, I had to make that decision and kind of have a little play with this first. And then once I was super happy with the exact placement, go back and add that title back in. This is exactly why I generally like to place everything first, get a feel for the layout, and then go back and add my glue. I was pretty lucky in this case because the title did come up quite easily. It's time to replicate my embellishment clusters. They do turn out a little bit different because, of course, I'm using slightly different floral elements, slightly different circular elements, but essentially it's still the main cluster on the right there that's going to anchor that right hand side, and then a smaller cluster on the left that will help lead the eye back across to the left hand side of the page. I'd love to recreate this layout actually a third time and use like a color blocking technique, have each row of either the cut file or the punches in a separate color of the rainbow. I think that would look really pretty as well, especially in these really soft tones from this collection. Actually, I do have a layout that's sort of a similar idea to that. I'll leave it in the description box below and in a card here. It's time to lock all of these elements in place, and that's going to call the second layout done. Of course, I want to share with you lots of close-up images from both of the layouts so that you can see all of the beautiful details. Thank you so much for being here, my creative friends. If you like the way that I scrapbook or the way that I chat about the way that I scrapbook, I would love it if you give this video a thumbs up. If you're wondering how you can use more Pink Fresh Studio supplies but with a more vintage style photo, I have a video that is sure to help. Check it out right here, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, bye!